This episode of the New Medical Nomads podcast is brought to you by Nomadicare. Now, personally, I love Nomadicare. I've used Nomadicare, and I recommend the company to all new travelers. What Nomadicare does is it takes the fear out of getting set up with a bad recruiter, which is the biggest fear that you have jumping into this journey. So they sit down, they interview recruiters, they vet them, get them on a list, and then provide them to you as a free service, as a free recruiter matchmaking service in order to get you started on your journey. Now, usually you only get 2 recruiters going through Nomadicare, but being a listener of the show, you can get 3. So this is how it's going to work. You go to nomadicare.com/Dylan. You will get set up with 3 recruiters to be on your dream team, as well as a guide to get you started on your journey.
Hey Nomad, this is Dylan, and I'll be coming at you from Thailand and Bali. But welcome to a series of blogs that have helped me along my journeys, along getting started and being a medical traveler. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the New Medical Nomads podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Dylan Callier, and thank you for joining another episode on the Bloggers series as I am away from my first milestone out of country trip in Thailand and Bali. So thank you so much. And this episode is actually going to be from our affiliate sponsor, Nomadicare. So Laura Latimer wrote a blog here titled Travel Recruiter Red Flags, 5 Things to Walk Away From. And I thought it was very good, and I wanted to bring all this information to you guys. So that is what we're going to be reading, and then I'll be adding some of my own little spices to it along the way as we're in this thing together. So Travel Recruiter Red Flags. As always, the word travelers is all inclusive. I am also talking to travel therapists and techs, also travel nurses. So the title of this, when you look it up, has travel nurse in the name. And all the blogger series that we're talking about, all the information is going to be applicable to travel nurses and sonographers and therapists and lab techs. So just because you see travel nurse in the title or travel therapy in the title doesn't mean it's only meant for that. That is just the specific niche of what that blogger is trying to reach, specifically with this blog post. So as always, the word travel nurse is all inclusive. I am also talking to travel therapists and techs. It's just hard to write them all out. And Google likes me to say travel nurse over and over and over, rather than travel healthcare worker or medical nomad. We all struggle with that. When we, as empowered travelers, decide to only work with recruiters who are dedicated to the win-win, we are doing our part in raising the integrity of the industry as a whole. Wait, my dear friend, did you skim that one? It's important enough for me to say again, and to say it in a big, bright picture to catch your eyes. So again, when we are empowered travelers, we decide to only work with recruiters who are dedicated to the win-win. We are doing our part in raising the integrity of the industry as a whole. When you hold persons on your dream team accountable for what you want to see in the industry, you are taking a stance. You are showing them that this is what we believe in. This is what we're going to work with, and we're not going to back down if it's not going to be that way. And so we have a power, we have a voice as a collective group in order to make sure that this industry is a win-win for everybody involved. We change this industry together. We as travel nurses, as travel therapists, and as travel techs, we have that power. When you decide what you say yes or no to, you are doing your part. When you decide how you'll walk away by being kind and clear in your communication on what was not okay, so our recruiters can learn, you are doing your part. When you decide to reward the recruiters who are amazing by working with them, you are doing your part. That is how we change the travel medical industry. The traveling industry rises up when we set clear and kind boundaries and when we know what to say no to. So step 1, knowing what to say no to. My goodness, when I started as a traveler, I didn't know what to look out for. I didn't even know I was supposed to be looking out for anything. Ah, sweet, sweet younger Laura. The joys of being naive. I just assumed that the industry knew what it was doing, that there was a fair standard that I was walking into, that my recruiter wouldn't lie or wouldn't misguide me, and that they would guide me through every step. It's not how it works, though. Turns out there are new pop-up companies all the time just trying to make a quick buck within the traveling industry. They heard through the grapevine that this is a great industry for making money, and here they are with no foundation or fair systems built. And if you look below this, if you go to nomadicare.com for this blog link, which will be found in the show notes, there's a little GIF there, GIF or GIF, depending on what part of the country you're in. And it's all about stick figures. And a little quick caveat, when I bounce around to patients and prescribe home exercise programs, and I used to not have like a computer that I could print out on, so I actually handwrite all my exercises on a piece of paper for my patients, and a lot of them are stick figures, standing up from a chair or doing squats or doing heel raises, whatever part of the body we're focusing on. And so I love stick figures. It's a great GIF. You should go check it out. And then we'll move on with this. Some of them hire Nomadicare to consult on what this industry even is. Sometimes the questions they ask me just make me feel like curling into a big old ball under my new weighted blanket, turning on the second season of Making a Murderer and calling it a day. How are you pitching these travel nurses jobs already if you don't even know the tiniest basics of what we do or what we need? I scream on the inside. On the outside, I take a deep breath. And instead of going into that oh so cozy ball, I walk them step by step on what is fair and what we need as travelers. I teach them how to show us pay and what fair overtime rates are. I will tell them about communication and recruiters' roles in us feeling safe and secure, and that they absolutely don't blind submit us. And on I teach. And then I pray that they listen and put it to action. And I pray that we as travelers know how to spot a good company and know what to walk away from in case they don't. But then every new month, new travel nurses come into our amazing subgroup, new travel therapists, new travel techs, and healthcare asking which traveling company is the best. But they have no idea what that question really means. And every month, a new travel recruitment company pops up that might not care to hire a consultant or just making their mistakes on us. And they only learn when we learn how to clearly and kindly say no. So to go back, something that used to be very common in this industry is something called blind submitting. And that has largely changed because of Nomadicare and because of Laura, because it's not fair for you to be submitted to a job if you don't give the consent to that company in order for them to submit you. Because then if you try to submit through another company, they have first dibs. And it used to be this really salesy tactic to make sure that you couldn't submit through another company. And there's also repercussions on the traveler for it. So now hardly any companies do this anymore, but there are some out there. So if you ever have a blind submittal, that means putting your resume on top of a desk without your consent. That is an absolute no. That is an absolute red flag. You do not work with somebody that does blind submitting unless you give them full consent, because sometimes you're in an industry where you need to move fast and you can give them forward consent saying, oh, okay, if it's in this area, meets this criteria, go ahead and submit me. You don't necessarily have to ask for my permission, but you should only do that with one individual, because if you have multiple resumes coming on the desk, it can have negative consequences to you as the traveler. The travel nurse nomad recruiter red flag list. If your recruiter does any of the things on this list, you can always walk away knowing that not all recruiters run their desks this way. Usually it's unintentional, but not all recruiters are trained well, and many are still learning. Many times they learn because we leave. You are a great teacher for them when you can set boundaries, practice great communication, and walk away with grace and kindness while you do it. So red flag number 1, get ready. Submitting us to travel assignments without our explicit approval. When a recruiter submits us to a job, that means our resume and application are given to a hospital or a facility. We are locked into that company to represent us for that assignment. That hospital or facility is going to then believe we want to work there and has all our paperwork to call us for an interview. If we have our paperwork in with multiple recruiters, which we should, we could get double submitted for the same position or called randomly for an interview when we are not prepared. And then in all italics, it says awkward. Yes, speed does matter when it comes to submitting our resume for an interview. And it's a competitive industry, and every advantage helps. But we also don't want our personal information being carelessly submitted all over the place without us hearing about it. So what our travel recruiters should do, again, part of your dream team and just making sure that you got the best persons working for you. Our recruiter sees a job opening that fits what they know that we are looking for. They contact us and they try to let us know as soon as possible. They show us a pay package before we get submitted to the job. We need to have an idea of pay and all the information they know about the assignment so that we can make an informed decision for our career. If they are telling you that this step takes too long, tell them many recruiters do this and can do this in 5 minutes, and suggest that they make a pay package template to use each time where they can just pop their numbers into it. We negotiate at this point with recruiters if need be. We also give them all the days off that we need during that 13 weeks and see where the gaps in information are so that we can prepare a list of things to ask the hospital interview and to start doing our own research. We say yes, submit to one and only one company. We tell our other recruiters that we have been submitted to X job, X hospital, so they do not double submit us. Remember, while companies have different jobs from each other, they also could have many overlapping jobs where 2 of your recruiters are telling you about the same opening. We do all this as fast as we can. We want to get our resume in ASAP when we find a job that fits our desires. So something to know, if you are wanting a dream team that is fast at responding, that means you need to be fast at responding. So when they find a job and you are both hustling in order to put you in the best position to get that job, to get that phone call, to get that interview, they want to come to you as quick as possible. They come to you, you need to respond very quick. So if you're expecting your recruiters to respond very fast, again, I say 24 hours or less, you also have to respond in that way. So this is a two-way street. The relationship that travelers have with recruiters is what makes this industry able to function. And so in order for you to have the best recruiters, you have to be one of the best travelers. You have to know that you are going to respond very quick. You're going to get your paperwork in on time. You're going to hustle for these guys so that they can hustle for you in order to get the dream job that you want. Red flag number 2, not showing us the full pay package before submitting us to a job. If you have a recruiter who is only giving you a gross number, gross meaning before taxes are taken out, or a net number, which is after taxes are taken out, basically the summary of what you're taking home for the net, you're missing some major information to help everyone's expectations fall in line. A full pay breakdown should, at the least, have the following in it before you agree to be submitted to a position. If they don't know something, they should write down unknown next to the line so that you can ask in the interview or remember to follow up about it later. And this one's for the recruiters that are listening. Make a template. Make your days easier for yourself. Get some systems for yourself. Just pop in the data whenever you get it. And this doesn't have to take a long time, but it is gold for getting everyone on the same page and being transparent as a recruiter for yourself, being more efficient, and also just being transparent with us. Thank you so much. Here's a pay breakdown template example. So when you get that big sum number, you got the net coming in. These are kind of the lines that you're looking for. You want taxable hourly rate, meals and incidentals reimbursement, housing reimbursement, travel reimbursement, license reimbursement, insurance if it's being taken out, overtime, extra time, holiday pay, on-call pay if you're a nurse or a sonographer if you're working in a hospital, guaranteed hours, call off allowance, cancellation policies, extension pays, and any extra details that they might have about the job. Scrub colors, float requirements if you're going to have to go to another different facility, your shift information, if that's going to be variable or not. If they have travelers from that company that have been there, past traveler reviews, parking, how's that going to look? Maybe the area that it's in, is that something you got to be concerned of with housing? How your orientation is going to be if they know ahead of time, and the documentation software that they use, and if you're familiar with it. So those things are nice to know before the interview, so you can kind of get a list of questions that you have. You should also have a list of questions that you have to go to, because if you're like me, you get in the middle of an interview, you start talking, you kind of forget, and then you forget that important question that you're going to ask. So that was a lot of information on the pay breakdown. I'm going to go just briefly into each and kind of describe it real fast. But this is probably something better that you can go directly for this blog post. And again, that will be in the show notes as well. So taxable hourly rate, that is going to be the hourly rate that you were getting per hour that has taxes included. The following are going to be tax deducted or tax-free money known to us travelers. That includes meals and incidentals. That's one separate category that we get for our per diems. And then the other part in our per diems is the housing reimbursements. Housing always needs to be higher than your meals and incidentals. This is also a really good talk to go to for the Travelers Conference for TravCon in order to make sure that you are setting up everything correctly. Travel reimbursement. The travel reimbursement and the license reimbursement. Sometimes you will be in an area where the per diems are so high, judged by GSA.gov, told to us by the government, much like San Jose or Silicon Valley or the Bay Area, a lot of the California areas, the housing costs are so high that the per diems are not going to be what really limits the amount of money you can make. It's going to be the bill rate from the hospital. And so in those areas, you can max out those per diems and you don't have to worry about the travel reimbursement, license and reimbursement. But in the case that you are earning a really good bill rate and you've maxed out your per diems, the hourly rate, you really don't want it to go up because that's going to be taxable. So where else can we put that cash that's going to be for you for tax-free income? And so these are license reimbursement. These are travel reimbursement. Something to know is that if the recruiters approach to you about insurance, if they know your insurance needs, and so if you have a family, there's going to be a large chunk taken out of that. You want to make sure that the number you are getting is after insurance, or at least included somewhere in that pay package. And then if the take-home pay is including the insurance, you want to be aware of that. If the take-home pay is not including your insurance costs, you really want to be aware of that. So it should be somewhere within that pay breakdown. Overtime and extra time, not necessarily the same thing. Overtime is determined by the state. Extra time is determined by the contract. So we'll cover extra time first. And then there are some special cases, especially being out in California, where there are two different things. So extra time, if you have a contract that says you are only going to work 36 hours per week, this is more typical for nurses with your shifts, not so much in the allied health world. But if you have a shift that's only for 36 hours, anything after 36 hours is considered extra time. When you pick up a shift, you might have these awkward hours that are more than was in your contract, but it's still less than overtime, because overtime is 40 hours per week. 40 hours per week in most states. So if you want to know if you're going to be paid between those 36 to 40 hours, and you want to make sure that you are getting paid for those hours, in case there's a company out there that may kind of have a different way of paying extra time, but you should always be paid for your time working. You should always document the time that you're working. Is actually illegal for you to work not on the clock. Overtime is decided by the state. Overtime in California is anything over than 8 hours a day. You could do 4 10-hour shifts in a week and earn overtime, but not extra time. You can work, at least in California, if you work over 40 hours a week, almost always guaranteed to be overtime. In Missouri, if you work over 8 hours a day, you work 10 hours a day, 4 days a week, that is not considered overtime. So you would not be getting overtime or extra time if you only have 40 hours in your contract. This will probably be an episode in all of its own just to understand it, but that is the basics. And then the following: holiday pay. This might be dependent on this facility, might be dependent on the contract between the staffing agency and the hospital, but it's good for expectations. So if you're going to be working on the holidays, you want to know if there's going to be some extra cash behind that, and just knowing ahead of time so that it's not a surprise. On-call pay, again, more for nurses and those in the hospital roles. Guaranteed hours, absolutely have that in the contract. I personally don't take anything less than 36. That being said, if you are in a market right now and you have to be more flexible, you might have to drop down to 32, but there should be some type of guaranteed hours before you decide to drive halfway across the United States and work for a company. If they're not able to put any skin in the game, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing the same without the same return. Call off allowances. Some facilities will guarantee, quote unquote, 36 hours a week, but also allow for unpaid call off shifts for up to X amount per 13 weeks. So make sure you know how many shifts you could potentially lose, because this may add up. Again, going into a contract thinking, being prepared for the worst, but hoping for the best. Cancellation policy. How many days in advance are they going to tell you that your contract has been canceled because of finding a permanent worker is usually the reason. Will you get 0? Will you get 2 weeks? Will you get a 4-week notice if your contract is canceled? Good to know upfront. And this is actually what happened during my first contract. I was able to initially negotiate a 2-week cancellation up to 30 days. And luckily I did, because the contract ended up finding a permanent person to replace me. So they had to give me a 30-day upfront notice. So I wasn't in a hole for my 30-day notice for my housing situation. So as soon as I knew I wasn't going to be there after 30 days, then I could tell my housing that I wasn't going to be there after 30 days. And so I didn't lose any money in that situation. Extension pay. Yes, this is something they will know at the start. At the very least, you want to know that the one-time payments of travel, the other reimbursements, things like that, outside of the per diems, outside of the taxable hourly rate, are going to go back into your pay if you stay at an assignment. It is not so much as a raise as it is making the same money again. If they don't give you those reimbursements back in another form, they just got a raise for your extension. So if you don't get all your blended rate back, which you'll hear in this community, back into that second contract at the bare minimum, that means that money is going somewhere else and it's likely going to the travel agency. Why do you need to know all this before submitting? Because this is how you're going to make empowered choices about where you want to pick up your life, move across the country, and work for the next 3 months. It's how you're able to compare pay between companies and have reality match expectations as much as you can. You guys know I'm big on communication, being able to communicate that, and then holding each other accountable. And it shows that your recruiter is not taking away any bad pieces and only showing you the rainbows as you try to get you to say yes to a job. You know what they know, and that allows you to work as a team and to trust one another. Red flag number 3, not putting promises in writing. Your recruiter is telling you details about a job or how pay works or the days off you will get on over the phone, and that's awesome. It's a perfect way to ask questions and be efficient with our time and not go back and forth with emails all day. So phone is a good thing. But for you, the empowered traveler, take notes, listen close, and write down what they say. Hopefully the recruiter does this as well, but we must be rock stars of our own lives and take the initiative, being proactive, not reactive. That way, whether we have a note-taking recruiter or not, we always land on top because we take control of the situation where we can and roll with things when we can. After all, life does happen. Again, if this is your first episode you're coming to, something's going to happen during that first contract. Just accept it and just know that you're going to survive. On some of the previous episodes, I've said my big mistake, so you can cycle through those and find out what that mistake was. We create our lives and we get to become captains of our own story. So when the call is over, email the notes to the recruiter. It's also not a bad thing to take notes during the interview and have that saved away, maybe even email it to the interviewer and just saying, hey, this is all the information I had. I just wanted to make sure I understood everything clearly, or if I missed anything, can you look over it? And then you have a documented something about either productivity or just anything that you might be able to use later on to hold them accountable in case you're also kind of getting the fluff story from the interviewer. So there's an email template that you can actually use on this blog. Recruiter, thanks so much for that great call. I made a list of things we covered and agreed on for reference for us both to use later. Can you write me back a yes if I got all of this right? And then you list everything that you went over. And then you say, I appreciate you, Dylan. Verbal promises, bad memories, he said, she said, are the ingredients for a big old disappointment pie. And nobody wins because that pie doesn't taste good. Put it in writing. If they refuse to put promises in writing, that's a big red flag, big old waving red flag. And this is similar to, I've never experienced this on contract, but as perm job, oh, that'll never happen, so we don't need to include it in the contract. Well, if it's never going to happen, then you should be really comfortable about putting that in the contract. Oh, one of my biggest pet peeves. And there's some other GIFs I don't recognize. I'm assuming this is a celebrity status person. But she doesn't look happy. She looks pretty disgusted and says when your recruiter tells you they can't put it in writing. That's pretty accurate. Red flag number 4, MIA, aka ghosting. You're a traveler putting a whole lot of load into this trust into one human as you pack up and head across the country to your next assignment. Rule number 1, they need to be there for you. The best recruiters get back to you within hours most of the time. They are still human. They have really busy jobs. It's really hard. It's very high demanding. It's salesy, or it is a sales job. So there's a lot of burnout that goes into it and a lot of stress that goes into it. And they're going constantly per day. And then if you think, oh, the recruiter's it's not a typical 9 to 5 because we work 9 to 5. So they have to be available after hours. So just something to keep in mind of. And these things we call life. The average ones get back to you the same day. If you're waiting days to hear back, what are you doing, recruiters? Like, seriously, what are you doing? Do you not want a full desk? I'm not sure what's going on. Laura says, I am surprised when I hear complaints from travelers who are actively reaching out to a recruiter and can't get a hold of them. It is a recruiter's dream to not be cold calling, emailing, or chasing travelers. Well, you, host recruiter, remain a mystery to me. But what is not a mystery is that they do not make the cut. See ya. You need to know that your recruiter will be there for you. Because if they're not there for you at the beginning, as you're getting set up with this interview, if it's taking time for them to get to you, if they're not coming back to you quickly with job opportunities or getting back to your questions, you can't put it up to risk that if you're in a sticky situation at a clinic or at a hospital, you want to know that you can get a hold of them. You want to know that they're going to be there. You don't want to have that question like, oh, well, I don't know. They kind of take like 2 days to get back to me. That's a big no-no. Unless you specifically request less, this is when and how often a travel recruiter should be in touch with you. During active jobs searches, 2 to 3 weeks before start date, I've actually gotten probably 6 weeks in advance if I'm potentially on assignment, but you should be getting daily updates. During an assignment, weekly hellos, texts, not phone calls, to talk about extensions 6 weeks before the end of the assignment, to start looking for the next job 4 to 5 weeks before the end of the assignment, or during a job cancellation. Daily updates, just like a new job search, urgency to the max during cancellations. So again, here's a list. They need to contact you during the job searches, during an assignment, weekly. When to talk about extensions, or when to talk about the next job. And then you should have a very clear, direct communication during a job cancellation. Red flag number 5, making you feel guilty for working with multiple recruiters and companies. Say you're buying a car. You may love your car salesman. He made you a cup of coffee. You bonded over last night's This Is Us. And you just really like him. And there's a man in a robe doing a happy dance. Yay to awesome recruiter bonding. That does not mean you don't Google the Kelley Blue Book value of that car. Of course you do. And of course that salesman would be ridiculous to tell you to blindly trust him and not do your own research. If he made you feel bad for talking to the dealer down the road to compare prices to see what cars they have, you would roll your eyes. You look him, but you have to get the best deal that you can for your car. You like him, not you look him. You like him, but you have to get the best deal for your car. It's way too big of a decision to make without doing a bit of research first. For travel nurses, for travelers, our Kelley Blue Book is talking to 2 or 3 different recruiters, 2 or 3 different staffing agencies. And of course, I recommend 3. I think it's the perfect number. Not too overwhelmed, but still gives you that great opportunity to land the dream job, the dream location, the places that you want to go. Bill rates change. Regions that have the most need for your specialty change. And sometimes companies can even offer you different cash for the same job for lots of valid reasons. Also, just like different car lots have different options for cars, in many of the same cars, it's the exact same with our recruiters and travel nurse jobs. So empowered traveler tips. Talk to 2 to 3 recruiters from different companies. Ask them where the jobs are and what the pay range is to expect in a specific region at the moment. When we are serious about applying for jobs, ask the recruiters to break down our pay fully so that we can compare pay between the companies. Then you'll know your worth for that location during that month. Now you can feel confident that when you get offers, you will know what to expect and can confidently say yes or no to pay packages. Recruiters who only work with you if you work exclusively with them, no. It is standard in the travel industry to work with multiple recruiters. Many people do it. It's the best way to do it. If you get any type of kind of guilty feeling, especially at the beginning, they're likely going to guilt you later on again, and don't do that. Many of us are way too empathetic for that. We kind of tend to fall for the guilt trips, or at least I do. Maybe I'm just projecting, but the empathetic portion of you, it's hard to ignore those guilt trips. And so if you get guilt tripped for working with multiple people, everybody does it. And that's how you get successful in this industry, because there are many, many different companies that you can work with. That being said, there are many different recruiters that you can work with. If that recruiter isn't comfortable with you working with multiple, then you can find somebody who is. Don't feel bad or guilty for doing your research on something. Your recruiter should be open to questions, and actually they will be really impressed with you if you're a savvy traveler and they want to work with savvy travelers. So if they want to work with a caliber of a traveler of what you are listening to the show, again, if you guys are listening to the show, you know, like 80 to 90% more than most travelers out there. If they want to work with that caliber of a traveler who responds very quick, who knows the industry, who knows what they need to do when it comes to extensions, knows that cancellations on contracts are not good from the traveler standpoint to come forward and cancel on a hospital. If you know these types of information going into it, you're going to be great to work with. And if you want a savvy, if that recruiter wants a savvy traveler, they have to be okay with you shopping around. They have to be okay with you being informed. They have to be okay with you being inquisitive, knowledgeable. And savvy recruiters get savvy travelers. We're all savvy and we're all nerds here. Having empathy even when a recruiter does mess up. Friends, we are all learning. Travelers, we make mistakes and are terrible to work with on accident sometimes also. My story of that is I didn't realize how big of a deal getting in the times off before a contract was. When somebody says, oh, this is a good contract, everything starts going in motion. You get the interview, they say, we want you. And now all of a sudden you're trying to put days off. It comes off as unprofessional. And I was told that because I get to work with the recruiters that match with me best, that are very straightforward, because that's what I like. I like to be told when I am doing something that's not okay. And so sometimes and same thing for a recruiter, sometimes you make a mistake and you don't realize you're doing it. But that's also why you want to open communication to say, hey, I actually didn't like that. It felt guilt trippy to me for you to say that. You should be open and be able to say that, because now you're helping them get better. So they don't do that to another traveler, because they might be awesome. But if it's this one thing that's kind of losing them other travelers, well, then we're all kind of losing in that situation. Recruiters are in all different stages of trying to figure this industry out. The world has a high turnover, and tons of recruiter calls, or tons of recruiters that will call you are in their first brutal year. They only know what they know until they know better. We are people that can help coach them to become better for our traveling brothers and sisters, our nomad community that they will interact with next. Let's assume everyone is good at their core, and we can get to come in and teach each other as we learn and grow. I learn from recruiters all the time. They are definitely worth listening to. But just because you're a kind does not mean that you are weak and can't walk away. You deserve a great recruiter. You absolutely do, and do not settle. We get to walk away when we need to, but we can still say thank you and wish people well. Even when we want to secretly switch their coffee to decaf or hide their keys, because that is switching to decaf or hiding keys, because they are just not a good recruiter. And it's so inconvenient for you as a traveler to get through that. My personal favorite is wishing that somebody will wake up 3 minutes before their alarm clock goes off. That's the most inconvenient thing I could think of for wishing on somebody. And so there's an email template here that you can actually use for those sticky situations if you don't know how to do it. So I actually really like this because this, kind of takes that emotional nervousness out of it. Hi, recruiter. I'm learning a lot about this industry and completely respect how much work you put in to find me jobs. However, I want to be honest with you, and these are a few things I'm concerned about. Reason 1, reason 2, all the red flags. I want to share this with you because maybe these things are unintentional, but for me, they are a big deal. Maybe this will help you learn and grow as a recruiter, or at the very least, we can find out if we really can be a good team together. Here's a link to Nomadic Carrier's Recruiter Red Flags if you want to learn more about the empowered traveler and recruiter movement. We have a set of standards to raise the trust and the integrity between recruiters and travelers. And then you can post this blog, or you can post my podcast too. That'd be awesome. Thanks for the support, guys. Feel free to check that out. And if you can, write me back and let me know your thoughts on the reasons that I've provided above. I appreciate all that you've done. Sincerely and warmly, Dylan. So that's a really cool way of, well, I guess not a cool way. It's not really a cool situation to say bye to somebody, and regardless of this, whatever it is. But sometimes, and most likely, you will be in a situation where you find that there's a personality that you don't necessarily want to work with, or doesn't, kind of do what we're expecting. It's really cool that we have this community now where there's so much information out there that we know what to expect. But again, not too much, just enough to get you started, and then you can listen to this podcast on your commute to work. Nomadic Care's mission is to raise the integrity and empowerment in this industry up and up. One way Nomadic Care does this is by pre-vetting recruiters for you. If you don't have your dream team of recruiters that have your back and pay you fair, we are here to help support you, and you can get your free pre-vetted recruiter matches here. You can also just go to nomadicare.com/Dylan, and you will automatically get 3 recruiters right off the bat. And is a company that I highly, highly recommend. It has helped me start on my journey, and has helped many of my friends start on their journeys, and has helped many podcast listener nomads to get started on their journey as well. So definitely all good things from Nomadic Care. As always, Nomadic Care is the only place in the industry to get a vetted recruiter match where the recruiters are held accountable to treating us kind and fair. If you don't find a recruiter you love through Nomadic Care, you will get $100. Holy cow. How about that? How about that for confidence? Let's raise the integrity of our wonderful industry up together by working with honest recruiters that have passion and hustle. Thank you so much, guys, for listening. Again, this is on nomadicare.com. It'll be in the show notes as well. This has been it's a pretty value-packed blog episode or blog, and you get to go on there and you read it and definitely take notes on this stuff. And eventually it will become second nature. But you want to have the notes ready for those red flags to keep an eye out. And then all your questions together as well for the interviews. Whether the interviews for the recruiters or the interviews are for the clinic that you're going to. But again, travel nurse recruiter red flags, 5 things to walk away from on nomadicare.com. If you have a question for myself, if you have a question for Laura, who wrote this, you can reach out to us both on New Medical Nomads Facebook group. We are both there for any questions about recruiter red flags or anything like that. There's also really good recruiters in that group as well that can reach out for any questions. And so sometimes travelers aren't the best to answer certain questions. And so recruiters will reach out and help us learn. It's a really cool relationship that we get. And it's unfortunate that there is a lot of fear out there when it goes to the relationship, but there are good recruiters out there. And Nomadic Care is the easiest way to find them. If you are looking for the next official launch of this show, the official episode launch, you can find it on New Medical Nomads podcast on the Facebook page. Or If you want the early access to these episodes, you can subscribe on YouTube. You can check us out on iTunes or Spotify, and then you will get the updates as soon as they are uploaded, rather than have to wait up to 2 weeks before it comes available on Facebook. But thank you so much, guys, for the engagement. I see the reviews on iTunes, the follows on Spotify, the subscriptions on YouTube, all the hearts, the likes, comments, and the shares ultimately allow more people to see this information, which ultimately allows us to help more individuals in the community, which is the ultimate goal of this show and ultimate goal of this podcast. So thank you so much, guys. Thanks for the support of the show. I hope you have a great day, and all you nomads have safe travels.